Good morning once again. You are listening to Dennis from Awakening in Health, and I have with me again today the wonderful Dr. Karen Benn, who is a wealth of knowledge on all sorts of different topics, including having a very diverse background in environmental sciences. And today we are going to be, tackling some myths that we're hearing around global pollution and climate change. So welcome this morning, Karen. And if you wanted to just give my listeners and viewers a very quick background on yourself, and then we'll get right into the meat of the topic.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Dennis. Yes, I'm a PhD environmental scientist and sociologist. I started off in teaching and moved into working in government. And my specialties are water quality management and water resource management. I've worked in 5 different state government departments across 3 states, and 2 federal government departments and a green NGO. And these days I run my own small business on tutoring for people with learning difficulties.
Very good. And one of the things that's kind of very much coming through, and I've been focusing very a lot on this over the last probably 10 years or so, is this idea that we're getting these terms thrown around like global boiling and climate destruction. I don't know how you can destroy a climate. A climate is a climate. But again, we're going to tackle those things. So it just seems to be that there's this massive association with the word carbon and what carbon is doing to our planets. And we seem to have these huge industries that have been developed out of nothing, which seem to me to be ending up taxing us more for this idea that man-made carbon or carbon dioxide is causing devastating harm to the planet. So just for people to try and get their heads around, can you just introduce us in some way to what this mysterious dangerous carbon thing is?
I'd love to. Thank you. I agree with you. They're depending on people's ignorance, and people are being brainwashed on a daily basis, in fact hourly basis. And a lot of people don't understand very basic things about carbon. So first of all, this planet we live on, the life of this planet actually shapes the planet. We work completely in sync with each other. So the way the crust and the geology of this planet works is influenced extraordinarily by life, and vice versa. It's like we have this symbiotic relationship, and it's very unique. The life on this planet is very, very unique, a lot more unique than people realise. And if anyone's interested in that, go and look up rare earth. There's a whole lot of literature, and it's on Wikipedia and stuff like that. It's really good to have a look at. It'll really shock you how hard it would be to find another Earth in the entire universe. Anyway, from there, let's look at carbon. So carbon is not the most multitudinous, the most prevalent element on Earth, but it is absolutely critical for life. So all life on this planet depends on carbon. It's an interesting atom. It's got properties that make it unique, such as the fact that I'm going to mention some terms, okay? And I know you've got some slides of mine that you'll probably pop in to, when you release this, let people know where they can find the slides to have an understanding of some of the things in, more clearly. It's good to see visuals. But carbon is tetravalent. What that means is it can bond with 4 other atoms very simply and easily. So carbon can form compounds as hard and tight as a diamond, and that's a lattice structure where you've got 3-dimensional lattice. It's pure carbon. They're very tight atoms formed together. Or it can form just chains which can twist and bend. And because it can do these different things, and there are some diagrams there to just show, if people want to have a look, that I've provided to Dennis, that show how and why it can form chains and how and why it can, form couples or triples or quadruples. But not many elements can. And because carbon can, it's the perfect element to grab other atoms such as hydrogen and oxygen, which are also prevalent on this planet. So basically what we're looking at is life has developed and evolved based on what are the elements on the planet and how can these things work together. Just like anything you build, you've got to look at the resources. How do you get the resources to fit together and work to make something? So the two most important chemical reactions on this planet are photosynthesis and respiration. And it's worth looking at those. Most of you listeners would have heard about them at high school. You've probably got a vague memory. Some of you, would remember the basics maybe. But none of the brainwashing we get will ever show you the diagrams of those chemical equations, just the basics of them, because you might start to think for yourself, well, what's the problem? So every living thing respires. Respiration means we make energy. We make energy for our bodies so they function, and that's the same for even a bacteria. And we also give off heat when we do that.
So it's basically gas in, gas out.
Yes.
Chemical reaction based on that gas coming in and
Yeah.
out.
Basically, to respire, we eat. Okay, and it doesn't matter what you eat, whether it's a protein, fat, or carbohydrate. Every one of those things is broken down to glucose. Your blood cannot absorb it. It won't go into your bloodstream or pass into your red blood cells unless it's at least as small as a glucose molecule, which is made up of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. It's a carbohydrate.
That's why it's called carbohydrate.
That's
because
right.
of the carbon base in the
hydrogen,
structure.
and oxygen. That's right. And what we need to do that is oxygen. So oxygen fuels it. I know it's hard to imagine a gas as a fuel. Well, maybe not. But we breathe in the oxygen. We eat the carbohydrate. Then there's a process that goes on in our cells. And lo and behold, we then produce carbon dioxide as a waste product and heat and some water vapour. Now, photosynthesis is flip that around. And photosynthesis had to happen first on Earth for the multitudinous array of animals that are on this Earth.
And quite simply, that just means photo is light.
That's
and
right.
synthesis is making stuff.
That's right, making stuff with light.
And that's the other thing which I think is important, is to steer a little bit away from that maybe dogmatic science babble, which confuses people unless they have a background in science, and just make everything really relatable. Because again, I think I talk a lot about the appeal to authority fallacy, and unfortunately what that means is when these authoritarian figures throw around this language, normal people feel alienated from that, and we need to just break that barrier back. Normal people like me can get this information if it's given to them in a way that we perceive.
Yep. So let's make that simple then. Way back, around about 550 million years ago, plants had made chlorophyll. We won't go into how they did it, but they made chlorophyll, which is a green substance which takes all the other spectrums of light and uses it, not the green part, but all the rest, and takes that light and makes food. That made food for itself. And that was the beginning of leaving behind just being bacteria and just being very small little microorganisms. Plants led us into the world of multicellular, like bigger organisms, all the way up to those dinosaurs. Plants make their own food. We don't. The plants make the food. We eat them, or we eat the animals that eat the plants. So for them, the chemical process is just the other way around. They start off to make the food. They have carbon dioxide and water vapor. That's all they need, because they're getting sunlight from the sun. So in the presence of sunlight, when the plant has access to carbon dioxide and water vapor, it will make carbohydrates. It makes glucose, carbohydrates, and it gives off oxygen as a waste product. But just remember, plants respire as well, because it's a living thing. So everything respires, but only green plants are making their own food through that process of using light and carbon dioxide and water. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is very, very small. I'm going to ask listeners to just think of a number in your head. How much carbon dioxide do you think is in the atmosphere? So just have a little think while I say a couple more things, and we'll see how on the money you are. And I'll give you a clue. There are two major gases in the atmosphere, nitrogen and oxygen. So there's 78% it's almost 79% of the atmosphere that surrounds us, that we breathe in, is nitrogen, and about 20% is oxygen. And
I want people to pause and think about that for a second. So nearly 80% of the air around us, some people, I'm sure, if they would listen to the media, would say, oh, it's carbon dioxide. It's not. It's nitrogen. That's really, really important.
Yeah. Yes, it's nitrogen, which is not bioavailable to us. We can't breathe in nitrogen and extract the nitrogen that way. We have to eat food to get our nitrogen. It's just a chemical pathway. So I've kind of given you a bit of a clue. Now, are you ready? Are you ready to be shocked? So you've found out how much nitrogen there is and how much oxygen there is. You've probably worked out that's getting pretty close to 100%.
Well, did you actually mention oxygen, which is 21%?
20, it's closer to 20%, and the nitrogen's really close to 79%. It's 78 point something. So we've got 99% of the atmosphere is nitrogen and oxygen. Now we've got to break it down to try and squeeze carbon dioxide in, because about 1% is water vapor, and that's a gas when it's in the atmosphere. So and argon as well. Argon's squeezed in there as well. So there's this tiny little amount left of a few other gases, and one of them is carbon dioxide, which is one carbon atom and two oxygen atoms. Okay, and that carbon dioxide works out to be 0.04%. And that 0.04% is the equivalent of 400 parts per million. 400 parts per million. Carbon is very, very important for all life on Earth, okay? All of it. Like, no life exists on this planet without the basis of carbon. It's the building block. So basically, carbon is rare. Carbon is really important, and there's only a tiny amount in the Earth's crust. There's a lot less than that. It's only 0.025% of the Earth's crust, and carbon is hard to get. Let me tell you, carbon is hard to get. Now, I think you've got the picture there. What we're going to do now is have a quick look at what's in the human body. So the human body is 65% oxygen, 18.5% carbon, and 10% hydrogen, with about 1% phosphorus and 3% nitrogen. So there's a diagram there where there's a little man, and he's coloured, from his toes upwards in different colours, to give you an idea.
People can get these slides from me, by the way, Dennis at awakeninginhealth.com, or Awakening in Health on my social media, or in fact just look at Awakening in Health on my social media as well. I'll try and transition those slides in. Sorry, Karen.
Yeah. No problem. So a lot of our body is water, and but you think every process that works in your body, every chemical process involves molecules that contain carbon. So imagine how much, quite frankly, if we had more carbon, like there was in the ancient past, we could have millions more organisms on this earth, millions more living together on this earth. So just as a contrast, during the Triassic and the Jurassic, which was the biggest biomass, a term we'll come back to later, the biggest mass of life on this earth, there was no ice at the poles. It was up to 14 degrees warmer than it is now. We could sustain gigantic animals and plants.
But so we're told that the world is going to boil over if we get a half a degree to 3 degrees hotter across the full range. And you're saying that there have been significant times in our history, prehistoric history, where the Earth was 14 degrees hotter.
Yes.
Something's starting now not to add up.
Yep. So, this is kept from us. So unfortunately, even the children at school don't get to see some of the slides that I've given. There's a slide just shows you the graphs of the changes in composition of the atmosphere and the temperature in ancient Earth. Because until we got green plants, they helped stabilise the planet. They actually helped to stabilise that. There's this cycle goes on, and it goes through us. It goes through the soil, the air, and us, all living things.
And some experts, and I loathe that expression now, are suggesting that it would be in our interest to actually cut down trees in order to build solar panels and things like that to sequester and to make greener energy and whatnot. I mean, are these guys off their lithium, or are they mental health medical? What's going on?
It truly is an example of the power of brainwashing. It's very easy to look at another time in history and another culture, let's say the USSR, and for us to look at them and say, how could they believe that guy? How could they believe Stalin? And how could they do those things they were told to do? Right throughout history, brainwashing is a technique that's been used, but never to the point that it's being used now.
I guess the vehicle to use that brainwashing, though, has changed significantly, because we have those brainwashing machines in the corner of our rooms. We have them in our back pockets. We have them wearing them on our wrists. Sometimes we have them in the libraries and the newspapers and the screens we're driving past. So we're getting. I mean, it's understandable.
Yes.
Isn't it?
It
and
is.
So I think it's important for people who are falling for the scam. Don't be too hard on yourself.
No.
We're really in a big battle, we're not.
Yeah.
You and me, Karen, we're not trying to make people feel inferior.
No, I was brainwashed too. I was a full-on rabid greenie,
and that's important.
I believed the whole lot.
Too.
That's what got me into environmental science. I thought I had to help save the planet, and it was a shock when I left the university. When I'd left school, left the brainwashing and left the university, and the big year was 2009 during my PhD, when I decided no more media from the television, like no more news from television, radio or newspapers, because I'd clearly seen for myself as a researcher there were lies there and it was propaganda. And that was it for me. And then I was very, very happy until along came COVID, and then I was very distracted by that.
Okay, let's get back on track. Yeah, so that's all really interesting stuff. Okay, so the Earth was there's periods where the Earth was incredibly hotter. The Earth didn't burn. No. Life, in fact, thrived. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes.
Okay.
Because when you say hotter, people think, when they think, say, an increase of 2 degrees, they think that's in their backyard. If you lived where Dennis and I live, it won't increase that much. Like we're actually right now going into a cooling period, and we won't go down that road today. But when they talk about 1.5 degrees increase in temperature or 1.5 degrees decrease in temperature, that's global. So those effects are felt a lot more at the extreme ends. If you were living in Tasmania when it got colder, you would feel it more than the people at the equator, which will have a very small, if any, noticeable drop in temperature, or vice versa for increase in temperature. So 14 degrees during the Cambrian period, plus 14 degrees warmer then, there was less ice, a lot less ice. It was after one of the glaciation periods, well and truly come out of a glaciation period. So it's the climate has always changed. We've got regular glaciation periods, and in the very, very ancient time when Earth was newly formed and still evolving, we've had 2 total extinctions through snowball Earth, because nothing kills more than cold. And I'm just going to leave that topic about that for a moment and just talk a little bit more about carbon before we move on to some other ways that, things we need to know about carbon, just so that we can stop worrying about it. So another thing you'll hear talked about quite a lot is methane. You'll hear people raving on about methane as if methane's going to change the climate. Well, I can put my hand on my heart and tell you methane's never, ever going to change the climate of this planet. And here's my reasons for being so confident. So first of all, methane is produced through biological processes in oxygen-deficient environments. So down in marshy swamps and places like that. When it is released, it moves up into the upper atmosphere, and we're talking about a percentage that makes carbon look positively plentiful. So methane, the percentage of methane in the atmosphere is 0.00017%. And I suppose the better way to try to imagine that is out of 100,000 drops of water, which equates to 5 litres. So try to think of something you've got at home that's around about 5 litres, contains around about 5 litres. And then you get a little dropper and maybe put some red dye in it or something and just drop 17 drops into 5 litres. You won't even see it. If it had a strong taste, you wouldn't even taste it. If it was the most toxic poison on Earth, I don't think it would touch the sides. So that's another huge brainwashing, is about methane. Because when it gets to the upper atmosphere, it actually breaks down to water. And then there's a part of a cycle.
So cows farting, cows burping, and these so-called experiments are these different, I would say, poisons, toxicities, these modified grasses and different grains that are given to these animals. I've even seen some experiments where they have tortured these poor cows. They've put actually little gates in their little doors in their stomach, surgically implanted these little doors to open and close them, to put things in and out of their stomachs. I mean, that's just horrific, all in the name of absurdity. So how is it that these people who are looking to reduce methane in cows, for example, and we're relying on them as experts, how can they not be aware of these basic things that you're talking about? How is that possible?
I've worked at 2 universities, and I saw firsthand how this works. So you've got a combination of 2 factors that happen. Once you're an expert, you want to stay there. So to keep your job at university, you're not going to rock the boat. Otherwise, you don't get the grants, and you don't get to keep your job. It's part of your status.
So if I wanted to continue the scam, I would ignore you, for example, who knows about methane, but I would look at somebody who's a gas expert and give them a grant to reduce methane in cows, and he would maybe never know that it's in relation to climate science. He might even know about climate science, but just diligently work away on that experiment, and then I tell the world about it to
Yep.
to perpetuate the bullshit.
Well, that's how you keep your job, keep your status, keep your great job, and it feels good and they're paid well. So all the top scientists, anyone who works in an institution, if you work at a university or a research institution, which is 99% of scientists and experts on the planet, hardly anyone works for themselves or straight only industry. Even people who work in industry actually work in universities as well. So you want to keep your job. Like you've spent, say, 20 years becoming an expert, and you don't want to throw it away. You simply won't look. You won't read those papers. And it's no different, please, I know this is an extreme comparison, but I think it's one people can relate to. You're in Germany, and it's 1936 in Berlin, and you can see that some people are being treated very badly and discriminated against. But you're told with posters and the radio all the time, it's for your benefit, it's to protect you. These people are diseased. These people are bad. These people are parasitic on our culture. So even if you've got a question in your mind about whether that's true, if those people who had those questions and had a look or had kind of worked it out, they left Germany. And the others were either trapped there or just trying to make the best of it. And no one ever thought it would escalate. No one thought with each step it was going to get worse and worse and worse till suddenly they were taking them all away. Now, the comparison with climate change is we're going to bombard you all day, every school child, primary school child. It's in every TV show, every cartoon. It's there constantly. So if your job relies on not questioning that narrative, you don't. In fact, you won't get funding to do any research without putting... And I know plenty of people who know that this is a hoax, but if they want to stay in their job, they do their research, and somewhere in there they tack in at least a sentence or a paragraph about how this will help or deter climate change, you know.
Wow, quite incredible. What we might do is we might take a quick break for a little bit of music, and you're listening to Dennis from Awakening in Health. I'm talking to Dr. Karen Benn about all things climate change, and we're going to look at pollution in the world as well. Welcome back to Awakening in Health this morning, and you are listening to Dennis. I'm talking to Dr. Karen Benn, and we've just gone over some stats about carbon dioxide, which... Again, I've been looking at this, as I said, for a while, so they're not a surprise to me, but I think for a lot of people listening, they will be. And to recap, we're talking about this absolutely tiny amount of carbon dioxide that's in our atmosphere, which was in vastly greater amounts in the past. When those vastly greater amounts of carbon dioxide were on the atmosphere in the past, we had a much greener planet, and we had a much more diverse ecosystem with both flora and fauna, and we are now having this narrative delivered to us that all things carbon are bad, carbon dioxide is bad, notwithstanding the fact that plants need it to survive. We even have net carbon zero, whatever the hell that means. We've also covered some of the percentages of these different gases in relation to how much there is, and we're talking about, some people would say, statistically zero, which is very, very important. And I invite anybody to listen back on the first part of the discussion. But one of the big things that I tend to notice is this massive conflation with pollution. So, and we I think we've got to be very switched on to the deception going on here. Because when people are put into these boxes of, let's say, anti-vaxxer or either anti-Semite, misogynist, they're all lumped together. And another one of those is one of these climate deniers that doesn't care about the planet and has almost has a relish or a glee in the planet being slowly strangled by horrible humanity. And I think that the conversation about pollution is really, really important. For example, I out and out reject the idea that carbon is in any way responsible for changing the climate, and we can go off and talk about that again. But the fact that these massive corporations are destroying thousands and thousands and millions of hectares of land, burning, poisoning, polluting, dumping plastics. For me, that is a massive, massive issue, and the way that the media try to overlap that with the carbon crisis, I think, is despicable. What are your thoughts on that?
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'd just like to remind anyone who's listening. So my first degree as an undergrad was environmental science. I have learned and taught all of the sciences, so geology, astronomy, physics, chemistry and biology. I'm a double major biologist. I've done a whole major on human biology and a major on all living things. I was 100% brainwashed. I worried myself sick about the planet because somebody had to save it. So I was a child of the 70s, and that took me on my path. I then did my master's in environmental science as well, but I focused on genetically modified organisms. And then I did my PhD on environmental science, but looking for the best way to manage environmental issues.
So to just understand what you're saying there, you were terrified that humans were killing the planet, and you felt almost on a mission to do something, to live your life with purpose, to save the planet from the destruction of humans. And I think it's again worth highlighting that little point, because I've had some experiences where I've had to deal with schools and be in schools, and the barrage of fear that's being inflicted on our young people today is absolutely horrendous. What you're saying, Karen, is it moved you enough to change the whole course of your life. Your life could have. I remember you telling me before, you could have been an artist.
I started as a dancer.
That's
and
right.
I was being. I'd been selected to be in a group where I was being trained for the Australian Ballet Company. I'm not saying I was a prima ballerina level, but I would have been very happy to be in a chorus, and I loved dancing. I was passionate about it. No, it changed my life. I was captured. When
you're saying captured, you mean you fell under the spell of the rubbish that's being taught?
My teachers were captured, so they taught it too. Actually, the teachers weren't as bad in my day when I was still at school, but my goodness, by the time I went to university, it was all doom and gloom. And I'd just like to put that in perspective as well. We cannot ignore the wealth of feedback and knowledge that people gained on both sides, all sides of World War II, on how to manage humans. And it was all to do with how can you communicate and literally bombard people with a belief. And the phenomenon which changed the world from my parents' time, who lived before World War II and up to then and afterwards, was the bomb. So the bomb represented for us something that could kill you, that was massive and we don't understand. We needed an expert to explain it to us. The other thing was, you can have all these nasty things in the world now that you cannot see, touch, smell, feel, or hear. The
invisible enemy, right?
The invisible enemy. And boy, did it work. It worked on me, it worked on everybody else. So if somebody said to you, oh, be careful, there could be cadmium in that water, you can't see it. You don't know how to know. Somebody else has to tell you. So this new phenomenon started from World War II onwards, of the scientists gaining traction with a high status level and a high input of advice to government. And that's where this all kind of started. And it works. It works really well. So, 90% of scientists in institutions get funding over a crisis, a disaster, something that's bad for you or the environment. So, you're not rewarded. When I started showing from my work, there's nothing to worry about, people didn't want to hear it. I've actually got friends who got upset with me that it could be all right, they were in such disbelief. And I thought, well, there you go. So we've been acculturated to disaster. Every news report, does it make you feel good? Are you happy when you listen to the news? And how accurate is it anyway?
Something that springs to mind is a fellow called Neil Ferguson from one of the universities in England. And these
Sage.
Absolutely preposterous figures about possible COVID-19 deaths, and the fact that this guy
did the same for the Cove-1,
and he also
80s.
was responsible for mad cow disease.
Yeah. Oh yes.
So
which
this
cost
guy
England,
absolutely
cost UK billions.
This guy should be rotting in a prison somewhere for the amount of destruction his so-called data has scared people. But again,
no, he does. Can I just let you know?
Yeah.
No data. Only models.
Correct.
He only used models.
My point was the data he input into the models, which was not reflective of real life situations whatsoever, and he couldn't replicate those models after when he was pushed. So we've got to really we can use these real life world examples to absolutely clarify what you're saying.
Yes.
You people, you have to be really very very
you
asleep
have to ask questions. And lucky for me, I've always asked questions, or I've either quietly asked questions and done my research, or I ask questions. And I'm when I was working at James Cook University, I would ask the people around me who were devout followers of the climate narrative,
scientism.
Yes, and they'd go, "Oh, I don't know," and I'd say, "Oh, did you read this article, or did you read?" And they hadn't. They don't read anything outside of the narrative. They don't. It's just like somebody who's, say, a Liberal voter who will not look at anything that Labor has done, or vice versa. They just refuse to have a look.
There was a good clip I posted of Alan Jones, Australian television and radio broadcaster, asking in one of the Australian shows here, Four Corners, about these politicians, militant climate change politicians, how much carbon dioxide was in the atmosphere, and none of them could describe how much there was. And for me, that shows some extreme element of incompetence at best, if not this malicious intent at worst.
Well, also, it's a perfect example of brainwashing. Imagine you've brainwashed people who represent our country, or represent us, to the point they don't even know anything about it. I mean, this is why I'm really keen, I'm very grateful to do this program with you, and also to supply some graphics, just to try to keep it very basic and simple so you can see for yourself as a listener. But I also just want to hit the nail on the head with models. So a very, very famous professor, whose name was George Box, he was what
was that name? B-O-X?
B-O-X, yes. Emeritus Professor George Box, who used to teach modelling. He said this: all models are wrong, but some models are useful.
Very, very prophetic. And when we think about it, even the modelling for things like lockdowns and for masks, these models had only 2 or 3 or 4 different ranges of inputs, which did not reflect in any way what normal life looks like or even is about.
Well, you just think of all of these institutions, like let's take CSIRO for example. They'll get their funding for a program based on a model. Hardly anyone is using empirical data these days. In my day, if you didn't have empirical data, you were told to go away and come back again when you've got real evidence.
And doesn't it seem to you that the people who are paying the money, it all seems to me that it has a very distinct focus in the normal people, our liberty being taken away and more restrictions being put on us time and time again. And also the thing which again has been on my radar for many years is this incessant push to generate as much fear as possible in society. And again, we've had some really good chats outside of these interviews about the very harmful effects of this pervasive long-term psychological stress and what that does to your body, and again it's responsible for some very sinister things.
Nobody dies of cholera, typhoid or bubonic plague anymore, but But in those days, those people weren't as stressed. The everyday average person wasn't as stressed. Now everybody's stressed, and if you're stressed, all of your cells are stressed, and you are more liable to be catching a cold, catching the flu, or just run down and not functioning well.
And conveniently, that very much benefits, I think, one of the other enemies of humanity, which is big pharma. Because if you're sick, these guys are making more money off you.
Yes.
But okay, so let's get back on track with this pollution idea.
So we'll just keep the pollution short, really. Pollution was around for a very long time. You know, it was very strong in the industrialist age when industrialism first kicked off. But over time, we've become really good at dealing with pollution, especially air pollution. When I went to France, I couldn't believe how clean the creeks and canals were, and the air was 100% beautiful and clear. Mind you, they've got nuclear power, so they don't have any of those industrial gases at all functioning. But if today, for a very long time now, since the 70s, and certainly prevalent in, and can only run steel plants and thermal energy generating plants if you have this part attached to your process, and it's called electrostatic precipitator. So electrostatic precipitator takes in the dirty gases that are produced first, and those gases go through a series of filtration processes where there are like the walls and panels of this structure. This structure is electrified and produces a charge, and it causes all the particles to stick to it. Then when you turn the machine off, all the particles fall down and get collected and disposed of. So really, have a think about this. I've seen nothing but photos that are supposed to scare you about air pollution, and all that's coming out of those thermal energy plants is water vapour. So here's a tip on how to recognise water vapour coming out of an industrial entity. It's white and it goes up. Now, I also supplied a couple of photos of some of the old. You can't get any modern photos, Dennis, of particulate matter coming out of any of these flues, these big stacks anymore. Because even in China, I've looked at the photos in China too, they're all using electrostatic precipitators too. So they strip all of the pollutants out, the particle pollutants out, and all that's coming out is water vapour. Now just beware, I showed a couple of photos of what I call sneaky photos to try and make those power plants look like they're producing pollution. They'll take it either very early in the morning when the clouds look pinkish or greyish pink, the clouds of water vapour. Or there's one classic photo there where it all looks burning hot and red, yellow, because it's done it nigh on sunset. So there's sneaky photos, but just look for yourself. Everywhere you go now, keep your eyes peeled, look for any stacks and see what colour's coming out. Now, occasionally you will probably come across a stack that produces a little bit of grey. You can ring them up and say, is your electrostatic precipitator working?
So I think the point there to make as well is that you're not saying that these big industries are clean and blameless. What I think you're doing is you're making the point that the push for the atmosphere being destroyed, the evidence for that gets less and less compelling when we're aware of some of these factors. Would that be right?
Well, what I'm pointing to is you are being hoodwinked all the time. If someone shows you a photo and they tell you it's air pollution, can you see something coming out of the flue? You're not saying to yourself, is it air pollution? Because you see something coming out of the flue. I used to work at UQ as well as a lecturer. I've had 30-year-old students doing their masters, and I was teaching in the business studies area. We showed them a photo, a classic photo to scare people. 2 tall buildings, a slit of beautiful, perfect blue sky between them, a stack with something coming out the top. Now, it was pure white and it was going up. I knew what it was.
Water vapor.
And I turned around to the students. I said, what's that stuff coming out of there? Oh, it's smoke. I said, is it? Anybody else think it's smoke? See, they've never seen anything coming out of stacks. They don't know. Nobody's telling them how to recognise the difference. My parents knew because it was stinky, smelly, heavy. It would fall down and it
people
would get in
would
your
get sick.
eyes. Yeah, you get sore eyes, you get sore throats, all that sort of stuff. So this is a classic case of scare you, scare you, scare you. And you've got to be so worried about pollution and so worried about everything. I mean, honestly, I could go on forever with examples of what we're supposed to be scared about. I've now become a myth buster for a lot of things, including some things I did during my PhD, which I didn't intend to do, but they're my favourite topics now in science, where we've been lied to. Me too. I believed it too. And then I've looked at the original papers, the original data, the stuff that's hidden and buried. So yes, it's part of this game plan to frighten us, keep us terrorised. While we're terrorised, we need the experts to tell us what to do, because we can't do anything. And we have to follow what they say. We have to trust and believe them, because, I mean, I don't know any sane people now who believe in the government, because if you look through history, this playbook's been done for thousands of years. You know, scare the people, make them come to daddy for advice, and daddy will fix it for you as long as you follow these rules. And by the way, it will cost you more. You'll all be paying more tax, and there'll be more laws. And if you want to operate as a business, we're just going to introduce more laws and more taxes.
And more restrictions.
And
And
more
to make
restrictions.
sure that that part of society
Yes.
stays trapped, stays
Yes.
poor, or in
Yes.
fact, if they are moderately wealthy, lose any gains that they made.
Yes. And just, I hope you know, just from what was said in the first part of our discussion, for anyone who's listening, carbon is rare. We cannot get our carbon from breathing it in. We have to eat it through our carbohydrates, okay? And the plants are doing all that job for us by making the food. To call carbon dioxide a pollutant, or it's so insane. It's very hard for me to think about this without getting a bit angry and upset, because it is the staff of all life on this planet. And carbon, if there's no carbon, you can kiss goodbye. Every living thing will die without carbon. It wouldn't even be here without carbon. We'll get no new organisms. It'll just, it's insane. And for someone like me who, you know, I've taught this stuff and learned this stuff for years, even when I was a greenie, I still didn't have a problem with carbon dioxide, luckily, because I used to teach the carbon cycle, the hydrogen cycle, and the nitrogen cycle. However, it's a testament to the powerfulness of the brainwashing. And the reason I want to hammer that is, you can't be blamed for being brainwashed. You are not stupid if you are brainwashed. You are simply brainwashed, and you won't know you're brainwashed till something happens. You either read or see or experience something for yourself, and then you'll go, oh my goodness, what a load of lies.
That's very important what you're saying there, because we and I've kind of know you fairly well at this stage. I think you know what I do. We're never banging this drum that we are right, but the side that's doing the brainwashing are absolutely sounding this from just about every single platform they can, that they are right, you're not the expert, you're wrong.
Oh, and you're not only wrong, you're a very bad person. You don't love the planet. You don't care about the planet. That's what I get from my... Hey, Karen, you don't care about the planet. It's like, hello,
but
I love the planet.
We have to be very clear here that what we're doing is we are challenging these narratives with evidence, and it's up to people, and I use this term quite a lot recently, is this term willful ignorance. If you are deliberately ignoring information, you've got a big problem.
Yes.
So we've heard the other side, because you can't avoid it, but we are bringing more evidence to the party that refutes everything that these these goons are
Yes.
telling us in
Yes.
order to keep us trapped and to keep us miserable and to keep us enslaved.
Yes. Now, way back at the beginning, when this whole hoax started, and before the government went with it, at the beginning, I found lots of scientists online. I have to tell you, there'd be a massive number of scientists online, even the ones that work in institutions, who know this is rubbish. So they know. There are just the ones being paid who'd rather not look. But otherwise, it is important to look.
And very important then to acknowledge the fact that there's not a consensus. We are only hearing one side of the narrative, but there are a vast number of people who actually do agree with your position and my position.
Yes.
And they're very eminently experienced and qualified, as you are yourself.
Thank you. And please know, science will never be matched up with that word consensus. Consensus is a political thing. Science is in itself
Always questioning.
always questioning.
Always
There's
questioning.
no answer. There's no one set answer. There's just what we know today. It's never-ending search for the more information.
That's a nice place to leave it. So I think in order to sum it up, if you have, I really feel sorry for the children in society at the moment, especially in Australia. But if you have children who are getting upset and who are scared about this stuff, show them this, play this video back to them, or let it, it's on my social medias, or get in touch with Dr. Benn through me. That's DENNIS at awakeninginhealth.com, or call into the radio station where this will first be aired. That's Cairns 89.1 FM. And start looking, start digging, start doing your own investigations. We've got a lot to cover in this conversation, so this will be part 1, but we're going to record the next part of it fairly soon. So I invite you to come back and have a listen to that again. You've been listening to Dennis at Awakening in Health, and I've been speaking to Dr. Karen Benn this morning about climate change and pollution. Thank you very much for joining us, Karen.
Thank you for the opportunity, Dennis.